Okay, I think we're ready to get started here. We've got everyone we're expecting today. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Tuesday, September 24th, Comox Valley Recreation Commission meeting. We'll begin by acknowledging that the lands on which we gather are the unceded territory of the Comox First Nation, the traditional keepers of this land. Online or on Zoom today, we have Director Arbor as well as alternate Director Jolicoeur. And in the room, we have Director Brown, Director Morin, Director Hardy, Director Grant, Director Hillian, Director Grieve, and Director Kerr. And Trustee Howe will be joining us shortly. Our first item today is a delegation from Lush Valley Food Action Society. Welcome, and you can come up to the podium and just press the button to turn on your microphone, please.
Well, hello, and thanks everybody for having Carly and myself, Marita, from Lush Valley Food Action Society. That's for it, great. So I actually just really wanted to start with a giant thank you. Carly and I believe we're here last May 2023, and we provided a delegation requesting that the regional district move towards a lease agreement with Lush Valley on the Solom Garden site at the exhibition ground. So I'm very happy to announce that with your support and with the support of the CVRD staff, as well as the support of the school district, who were the previous lease holders, that we now have a signed 5-year lease agreement for the site. So this is super exciting for us. It comes into effect November 2nd, 2024. So thank you for that. And our reason for the delegation with you today is simply to provide a bit of an update on the site and the benefits of the work, to provide details about our approved garden expansion on the site. And again, just discussing ways the CVRD has been supporting the project and opportunities for support and partnership going forward. So again, I did just want to take a moment to acknowledge that the land that we're speaking about and working on is the traditional lands of the Pentlatch, Aigson, Siitla, and Satlut, and other groups now collectively known as the Comox First Nation, and to recognize their stewardship of the lands that we now work and live on. So as many of you already know, Lush Valley, our vision is a region where healthy local food is at the heart of community well-being. And the way that we reach that vision is by working with people in our community so they can gain food systems tools, engage in just and resilient local food systems, and receive equitable access to nourishing food. So the Solom Garden is one of the projects, one of our many projects, and I will pass it over to Carly to talk in more detail about the site.
So we're here today to talk about the Solom Community Garden, which is located on the Comox Valley exhibition grounds, adjacent to the Farmers Market parking lot. The garden is approximately 1/3 of an acre and was established in 2017 by Mid-Island Farmers Institute as an educational garden. The space was originally used as a compost education site. In 2019, SD71 took over the lease of the garden. Though there was some use by Vanier Secondary, the land was largely fallow. In 2020, Lush began working on the site. We have maintained an active presence on the land since, running accessible food literacy programming, making infrastructure upgrades, and distributing produce through the Comox Valley. Last year, we began the process of transferring the lease from SD71 to Lush Valley. Thanks to CVRD staff support, we're glad to inform the Rec Commission that Lush will officially become the leaseholder as of November 2nd, 2024. In more good news, we've also received approval from staff to expand the garden, nearly doubling the amount of land we are able to cultivate. So as you can see here, this is just a little graphic of the current garden site and where the proposed expansion is going to be. So we'll be working on that through the fall and winter. With the expansion, we'll be able to increase the area of cultivation immensely. Our plans for the space include converting the existing grass field into an annual vegetable garden, constructing a greenhouse, and expanding our fruit and nut orchard. So operating the Solemn Garden is in alignment with the CVRD strategic drivers of climate change mitigation and adaptation, food security and local agriculture, and community resilience and engagement. Our 2023 delegation focused on these strategic drivers, so I won't spend much time here, but I wanted to make a note of how in alignment the garden is with these strategic drivers. So we're here today to highlight the benefits of the Solemn Garden as a rec space for the Comox Valley community, and to once again seek support from the Rec Commission to expand our ability to provide barrier-free food literacy education for all. Lush programming on CVRD land offers numerous recreation benefits, including reducing social isolation, encouraging an active lifestyle, forging community connections, increasing access to healthy local food, providing opportunities for land-based learning, learning about regenerative organic farming, and encouraging connections to the natural world, among many other benefits. The Solemn Garden provides a space for Lush to offer programming to youth, seniors, and community members. We focus on food literacy education through workshops, weekly work parties, and public events. Through this work, we're consistently making improvements to the exhibition grounds land. Through the 2023-24 season, we saw over 320 volunteer hours go into the upkeep of the Solemn Garden in our weekly work parties. We hosted 2 sessions of our Farm and Forage summer camp to a dozen youth. We facilitated 8 public workshops and 4 workshops to Vanier secondary students and staff, including a training on soil health to lead schools involved in the SD71 School Garden Pilot Program. In addition to programming alignment, the produce of the Solemn Garden further strengthens our community. Because of Lush's unique position as a food aggregation and distribution organization, we're able to use all of the produce cultivated in our garden in the hot meal and good food box programs. Food is redistributed to our community's most vulnerable, working with organizations including Senior Support Society, Connect, Better at Home, Washington Apartments, Community Cares, and Comox First Nation. Recipients of these programs receive all food for free. Lush is grateful to the CVRD for their willingness to expand our community garden, and it's going to take a lot of work. The biggest infrastructure upgrades in the next year will be reconstructing the existing fence and running a second water line. The current fence has some rotting posts, it's aged, and does not encompass the expanded garden area. We've been quoted at $8,000 for fence upgrades from Tower Fencing. Installing a second water line is also essential to the expansion, as it will allow us to run drip irrigation into annual crop beds. Running a second water line and purchasing the necessary irrigation supplies was quoted at $4,000 from Irritex.
Thanks, Carly. Yeah, so we really love this garden. It's a real joy to see the space expand and to have the knowledge of land security that the lease is going to provide, as well as support for the expansion over the next 5 years. And while the expansion will be happening really over the next year. Yeah, so we feel it's a cause for celebration and something that we can boast a little bit about, both Lush Valley and the regional district. You know, it's a feel-good story, and we're inviting the regional district to share our collective story of this space. So as we go through the process of upgrading the space, we'll be taking photos. We'll, you know, be sure to kind of share those with the regional district and invite the regional district to come out and have a look at the site and see what we've been up to. We've also been busy seeking in-kind and fiscal or financial support for the garden expansion. And so we've had some good uptake already from the Rotary clubs. They're going to be helping provide some labor on site and possibly some in-kind support as well. We've actually already been successful in a grant for an on-site hoop house. So we'll be installing a hoop house with the expansion project that will allow us to extend the season, the growing season. Yeah, and we're really hoping that this expansion will actually start in the fall and that we'll be able to finish the expansion project so that we can be working on the new lands in the 2025 season. So with that, I also just wanted to say a big thank you because we just got confirmation from CVRD staff that they will be able to help us with the fence and irrigation components of the project from like, so 2024 and 2025, so that we can get it up and running for that 2025 season. So thank you for that. That's wonderful new news to us. So I'm going to skip that other part of my request because we just got that confirmation. So that's wonderful. And I think we just want to encourage that we would continue to be in conversation with the regional district regarding some of the maintenance costs and funding that would be attached to just, hosting this site. So just basically the request is for ongoing communication around the site and for the regional district to celebrate the site with us. And as a real feel-good project that's aligned with the values. So in closing, the garden again is in alignment with the regional district's priorities and strategic drivers. And so we're just encouraging sharing of this story and investment in the Solon Gardens, which you've already shown. These gardens support long-term sustainability, health, and community well-being. And so the return on investment is improved community health, reduced food insecurity, and increased public engagement. So thanks again for your support.
Thank you very much. It's great to hear this update. Really pleased to hear that a lease agreement's been signed and the expansion will soon be underway. I think it'll be great to see that additional space transformed. And I'm also pleased to hear that we've found some supports for some of the asks that you're planning on making today. So it sounds like good news all around. And I'll pass it over to Director Brown.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to say I've had the opportunity to volunteer in said garden, and it's quite an amazing, productive space and well positioned for the school to have access. And I just think it's a wonderful addition. And so congratulations and yay for food. My only question is, you mentioned that you're distributing the food, and is that through the food box program? Awesome. Thanks.
Okay, we have Director Morin.
Great, thanks, Chair. Thanks for the presentation. I can hardly keep up with all the everything that you're up to. So Mayor Brown mentioned the tie-in with the Vanier, potentially the Vanier students and other students in that area, which I guess is ongoing. So I was curious about what makes up the rest of the community garden in terms of users. Is it East Courtney, North Courtney area B residents, or from all over? Yeah, I did have a couple other quick questions if nobody's got their light on. Thanks.
Just one sec. Sorry, go ahead.
We have people coming from all over the valley to volunteer. So yeah, people from a lot of different areas, regional areas. And then, yeah, students from Vanier, and because we host quite a few workshops there, public workshops, that's again, people from all over the valley.
Right.
Yeah. So anybody who from the public who wants to come on.
To access the educational programs.
Exactly.
Yeah, I just think it's great that we do have a space on the other side of the river for the folks that are over there. Because we do have the community garden in town. And a couple other things, are we integrating any recreational programming into this site in terms of anything that we're offering? Maybe that's more of a staff question in terms of community partnerships and offering some rec programming.
Sure. Jennifer Zimins, our Senior Manager of Recreation Facilities. And I think, yeah, Jennifer, if you can comment on that. And just to Director Morin, is that specifically this piece of the exhibition grounds or more?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if we have any programming now or planned to kind of partner with Lush on some rec programming. Thanks. Just similar to what we've done with Comox First Nations and mental health. And we've been doing some really great work in that area.
Through the chair, staff actually have a meeting with Lush Valley representatives on Monday, October 7th. And that's sort of our next step, is to look at how we can partner on some gardening education, summer camps with the kids, or, just sort of encompass what we already do with recreation, but incorporating some of those educational components that are really important. So.
awesome, music to my ears. I mean, obviously there's the physical, exercise piece of it, but then also the social well-being. Very quick one. Quickly. Aggregation. I know the food boxes, I think, are being put together in your Town location. So does that mean that the food from this garden gets taken over there to be put together?
Yes, so if there's enough like quantity to be distributed in the good food boxes, then it goes to the boxes. And if the quantity isn't as much, it goes into the hot meal program. So it gets cooked up into our sort of
Right.
soup kitchen program.
But basically it does have to move.
Sorry?
Basically, it would have to move to a space to be able to do that.
Yeah.
There's nothing on site for that.
There's nothing on site.
Right. Another argument for more things on that side of the river. Okay, thank you so much.
Thanks for those questions, Director. And seeing no other lights on, we'll move on. Thanks again for being here today, Marita and Carly. And I trust that there's going to be lots of opportunities for us to work together with you on what's possible on the site. So thanks again for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Okay, the next item is a late delegation request from United Soccer Club. Slightly different process on this, as we do need a resolution to proceed with the delegation thank you for that. And I don't see any lights on, so I don't think any discussion is, alternate director Jolicoeur, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and hi, everyone. Yeah, I'm looking to hear from staff around their interpretation of our procedural bylaw. Just for clarification, my understanding is that we typically don't allow same delegation within a year on the same topic, and so just wondering if we can hear from our corporate officer.
Yes, staff will answer that.
Thanks. And I'll actually ask Lisa Dennis, Manager of Legislative Services, to respond. Lisa.
Thank you. So through the CIO and the chair to the director, we don't actually have anything in our procedure bylaw currently that prevents, that puts any time limit on delegation. We have proposed one recently, but at the current time, we don't have that.
Thanks for that. Yeah, so it has yet to be adopted, but it is basically a very near future change that's coming. Did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I guess, and thanks, Chair, and thanks to staff. Just in the absence of a policy that's or a procedure bylaw that's been amended, I guess I do kind of just feel a little odd that this request is coming in and the interpretation of that right now. But yeah, I look forward to having a clearly defined procedural bylaw so that these types of requests come to us with some clear guidance. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks for that. And seeing no other lights on, I'll call the vote. It needs to be a 2/3 majority in order to proceed. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? And that passes unanimously. So you're welcome to come up to the podium, Stefan. And there's a light at the base, or a button at the base to turn on the red light. There you have it. All right, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, esteemed members of the Regional District. I'm here once again. Not much of what I'm going to tell you is going to be new. I just want to reiterate all of the rationale behind why we not just require, we greatly need a second artificial turf built in our community. Just a bit of background. I started this initiative on behalf of our club several years ago, going to the town of Comox, city of Courtenay, and this fora as well. And where we've gotten to is really great. Thank you for the staff's work on the strategic plan, which not only includes the turf for field sports, but also pools and ice rinks, which are greatly needed in our community. Sports is the essence of life for a lot of people, and we really need to invest in this type of infrastructure for not only giving kids something to do, but for public health purposes. We as a club have grown a lot over the last 8 years. When I became a board member in February 2017, we had about 800 youth registrations, and we're looking at eclipsing 1,500 in the spring for this year, unique registrations. Obviously, with this growth, we require more facilities, and obviously with more growth at the recreational level, that leads to more growth at the competitive level. We also have our academy program, which is bursting at the seams. Having run that program for many years myself, we had about 100 kids on the turf on Monday nights for about an hour and a half. Now we have 3 time slots and pushing nearly 300 kids. All told, that's a lot of growth. And I know that our club is not the only one that has grown. I don't want to speak for other organizations, but I know that baseball has grown a lot. I know that rugby has grown recently, amongst other sports. The demand is extremely great. I would like to make another point that 15 years ago or so, there was a study done which indicated that 2 turf fields were required in approximately 2008. At that point, there was a lot of momentum to build 2 turf fields at Valley View. It was approved until the last moment when residents of the Valley View area did not want high stadium lights in their area. I don't know what happened. I wasn't living here at the time of that vote. However, it seemed like some backroom discussions catapulted their perspective and did not allow us to have the turf fields built. We do have our current turf, which we really love and appreciate, and we use it to the maximum effect, but we need more. Our organization is not just a soccer club. We are a pillar of the community. We have done our share in terms of providing funding, sponsorship, donation to local sports infrastructure. If you add it all up, it's well over $1 million, and we have more earmarked to build a field house at the Vanier Turf Complex. We're going to start building that very soon. All the approvals are in place, and it just goes to show that we are committed members of the community. For this new turf, we're willing to do the same thing if there's a trustworthy relationship with our local leadership, and our community is going to step up and build new facilities. Again, this isn't a nice to have. This is a must have in our community. To close, I just want to point out to the strategic plan, which is quite excellent and built by the staff, and it's been approved by this forum. It's not only just a turf field. It is a roadmap to build critical sports infrastructure in the Comox Valley. It includes a turf field. It includes upgrades to pools. It includes upgrades to ice rinks. If we can't move this forward, we cannot move anything else forward. When we look at the demographics in our community, we have something like 80,000 people in the regional district right now. By 2040, 2041, we're going to eclipse 100,000. It's families that are moving here. Families need services. Kids need something to do. Kids are not just going to go wander in the woods. They need places to go and play and recreate. So to close, I would implore everyone at the table today to vote yes on the motion put forward today to get the thing built, get the turf built, get the pools built, get the ice rinks built, and do the right thing. Thank you very much.
Thanks for that. Are you okay to take questions if there are any?
Absolutely.
I don't see any. I guess we've had some good discussions both with yourself and as a board over the last few months. So with that, I'll just thank you for coming today, and you're welcome to stay and watch the meeting if you like.
Thank you.
All right, moving right along, a resolution status report for receipt. Moved by Grant, seconded by Hillian. Any discussion on that report? Seeing none, anyone opposed? And seeing none, that's carried. And our next item is our reports, artificial turf field borrowing options. Could I get a motion for receipt, please? Moved by Hillian, seconded by Grieve, I think. Oh, my hearing's off today. I'll pass it over to staff.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon to the Commission. I'll introduce Trish Morgan, our Assistant Senior Manager of Recreation Services, to present the staff report. Just as a bit of an introduction, this staff report comes to you following direction previously this year around financing option or borrowing options for this artificial turf, which is identified as the highest priority in the Recreation Commission strategic plan. Staff have also reported on the decarbonization plan and prepared this report for you today on borrowing options. So Trish, over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, James. And I apologize, I'm getting over a cold, which probably many of you have run into others with this similar cold that likes to hang on. But I'll do my best today. So let's see if we can. There we go, right button. So as the commission recalls, the CBRD has been investigating the construction of a second artificial turf field since last fall. After a lot of discussion when the budget was presented last February, the project was removed from the budget until the decarbonization strategy was completed. At that time, there was still a lot of unknowns in terms of the costs and the overall impacts of that strategy. The strategy was completed last spring, and the projects identified in the plan are now woven into the long-term capital plan, which we'll talk about in the next report. This pause, however, gave the CBRD time to invest additional funds into reserves and to allocate growing community funds for the turf field project. As a result of that investment, there is now an opportunity to fund the construction of the artificial turf field with long-term borrowing without increasing the maximum tax rate. In June, we brought forward a report that provided a summary of all that work that had been completed on the turf, and a resolution was made by the Commission to bring back borrowing options. So the first option is long-term borrowing. So in the scenarios that are being presented, the long-term borrowing will not require an amendment to the service establishment bylaw. Our maximum tax rate is 4 cents per thousand, and in the 10-year scenario and in the 15-year long-term borrowing scenario, both of those keep the tax rate under 4 cents per thousand. But because it is long-term borrowing, it does require elector approval, and staff are recommending that an alternative approval process be utilized versus a referendum. The advantage of this approach is there's a shorter timeline to complete the process, and there's a reduced cost to seek approval from the electorate. We can also start and complete construction in 2025 if an AAP is held in early 2025 in January. In terms of the difference between the 10-year borrowing and the 15-year borrowing, staff are recommending 10-year. The tax rate in 2024 was 3.6 cents per thousand as a result of a large contribution to reserve. If we make another large contribution in 2025 towards the construction of the field, we can keep that tax rate again under 4 cents, and it would be at 3.1 cents per thousand. Now, if we were to run it through a 10-year borrowing scenario versus 15, the difference in the tax rate or taxes to the households would be $25 versus $22.33. So only a difference of $2.69. But over 15 years, that would add up as additional costs. The other concern that we have about the 15-year borrowing is that the lifespan of a turf is 10 to 15 years, and typically we don't want to extend the debt over the term of the lifespan of the turf. Now, of course, the whole project is about 5.9 million. When the turf comes due, that's about $1 or $1.5 million to renew the turf itself. So it's not the whole cost of the project, but we don't want to extend the borrowing past that term. Our other option is short-term borrowing, which was presented previously, and that's 5-year borrowing. So elector approval is not required, as you recall, but we do require an amendment to the service establishment bylaw. So even with the injection of those additional reserve funds, we are pushing over the 4 cents per thousand during the term of the borrowing to 4.3 cents per thousand. So for that reason, we're not recommending that we go with 5 years. So staff's recommendation is that we're directed to proceed with artificial turf field project as generally outlined in the staff report, with $3 million financed through long-term borrowing over 10 years so that the field may be constructed in 2025. And that staff bring forward a loan authorization bylaw and process considerations for obtaining participating area approval of the loan authorization bylaw by way of an alternative approval process. If the commission and board are in agreement, an AAP can be held in January. The final design will be completed through the fall. Tender documents can be prepared and procurement processes can start close to the end of the AAP. And then if the AAP is successful, contracts can be awarded for the project. We can start construction in May. And as long as the weather is in our favor, it should wrap up by mid-September. And that's the summary of the artificial turf field. Are there any questions?
Thanks for that report, and the timeline summary I thought was really helpful depiction of kind of the path ahead should we proceed with option 1 tonight, so, or today, I should say. And Director Hardy.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. The only question I have was if it did go to a referendum, what would the cost for the referendum be?
Sorry, I see Trish is looking at Jake Martins, our General Manager of Corporate Services.
I do have that somewhere, but Jake is better off to.
Okay, Jake, if you want to respond.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and to the Commission. So a regional referendum in this sense would be a full-scale endeavor for us to undertake, and certainly we'd estimate those costs somewhere in the neighborhood of at least $60,000 to undertake. We haven't done a regional referendum in a number of years, but we would anticipate having to have voting locations around the valley and staff fully staffed up on those polling locations as well. So it's a significant piece of work and one that's fairly costly.
And seeing as we're on that topic, maybe I'll chime in with a follow-up that how much longer would that add to the process that's outlined on the slide on the screen? Helps if I.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the Act does require us to undertake a voting within a certain time frame of the bylaws receiving third reading. So the timeline is there is an extension to it, but it's not significant. There is more time required, but I wouldn't put it in the realm of months. It's a modest extension of the timeline that we've noted through an AAP.
Thank you. And Director Brown.
Thanks, Chair. I'm just wondering about where this project, and I know we have the long-term facilities plan in this package as well, which I did read, but I still don't know how this one bumps up against the replacement of the original field and the timing around that.
Certainly. Just gonna go to spreadsheet. Through the chair to the director. So at this point, we're anticipating renewing the current turf in 2029. And it's just the turf that has to replace. So it's not a cost of 5.9. Right now it's budgeted at 1 million. 50% of that cost is paid by the school district. So we do have a partnership agreement with them.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks for that question, and Director Kerr.
It's going to be deja vu for Director Grant from our Comox deliberations over budget, but I'm a big fan of paying off things as soon as you can. Paying off larger amounts of interest over time just doesn't sit well with me, especially if the users are the ones that are paying the tax now. So I'm kind of leaning towards the 5-year option. Question about that. If we're going to an alternate approval process anyway, because it's long-term borrowing, couldn't we do an AAP as well just to increase the short-term tax rate above the 0.04? Just not sure, like it's being used as an argument to not go above that number because we don't have to do a alternate approval process, but we're doing that anyway for long-term borrowing. So could you just explain the rationale for 10 versus 5-year? Thanks.
So we would, for the turf field, we would only be going to an AAP if you choose long-term borrowing. At this point, it's not, and Jake, correct me if I'm wrong, it's not that you couldn't use an AAP, it's just not widely used. Typically, it's through approval of the participants. So if we went with 5-year, we could do an AAP, but it's not. And then you could address the maximum requisition limit at that point. So if you chose to do that, it's just not a typical process, but it is possible.
Did you want to add something?
No, thanks, Chair. I think just address the point that I was going to make, which is you could opt to undertake an AAP just for the amendment to the service establishment bylaw to increase the maximum requisition. We've chosen, as the Commission is aware, back in December to attempt to do that through Director and Council consent. That was not successful. You could choose to change your approach and undertake an AAP just for that point alone.
That's helpful. Thank you. And let's have another, and
Lucy Wincharik is our Chief Financial Officer and has jumped to the table for adding some context, I think, around this. So Lucy.
thanks for joining us.
Thank you through the chair. And I just wanted to make one point of clarity, and you may already know this, but I wanted to just make sure. Your question that I heard was about, so why the 10-year as opposed to the 5-year? And I just also wanted to put out there that we've done this work around that long range plan, which is next in your package. And one of the reasons of recommending the 10-year is that it is a lesser amount clearly per household as we move along. And it just makes a bit more room as you bring on some of the other projects that are considered in your 10-year plan. So that was another reason why we've put the recommendation forward to put the turf field at 10 years as well. Yeah.
Thanks for that additional information. And Director Hillian.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for the report. I just wanted to state for the record that I have a bias on this issue. I am a soccer player. I've lived in the Valley for 45 years. I've coached for 15 of those years. The youngest children that I coached were 4 years old. 2 weeks ago, I had the opportunity to play in the BC over 55 games, and we brought home a gold medal, by the way. But the oldest player on our team was 85. So we're talking about a sport that involves participation from the youngest children to the oldest members of our community. And I think this is a long-term investment that we're making here that will pay all sorts of dividends. And I'd really like to encourage people to support it on behalf of all the people in our community who get pleasure from this and all the others who benefit from it in many ways. Thank you.
Thanks for those comments. And we'll go to Director Arbor online.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I wasn't.
Are you able to put your video on, Director Arbor, or is it not available?
Yeah, I can turn it on. Just there you go.
Thank
yeah,
you.
thanks, Chair. Yeah, I wasn't going to address that, but I want to say that I'm a passionate soccer player as well, and have been coaching as well. And I think that soccer has existed for a very long time without plastic fields, and so I don't necessarily equate one with the other necessarily. And in my area, a lot of players develop or play and enjoy the game on Class C fields. So anyways, I don't think we should debate the merit again, because otherwise I think I will draw Director Brown into it again. But my question was more, in June, we passed a motion for staff to continue negotiation to bring in Cumberland into the service. So I'm just wondering if there's an update on that, or if we're making the decision today prior to Cumberland actually being in the service.
Sorry,
Yeah, go ahead.
looking around the room to which staff member is going to answer. Just a moment.
Trish can
Through the chair to the director. So we did try to set up some meetings. Unfortunately, as you know, summer is very busy. We had competing schedules with vacations and other priorities. So as we got closer to working on this, we thought maybe we would just pause, because the information we were going to be bringing back to them was a whole array of different options. And we thought maybe it would be better, because we were getting so close to this meeting, to wait and then just bring forward the information that came out of this meeting.
Thanks for that context. Did you have a follow-up, Director Arbor?
No, thanks. I do want to say that I think it would have been preferable to make that decision knowing that everybody is in. Again, not revisiting old conversations, but I think Area A and Cumberland have seen the emergence of this priority in a similar perspective. And I just want to be able to communicate to my residents, if this goes to AAP, whether Cumberland's actually going to participate or not, or So it would have been best, but I understand that the decision is before us today. So thank you for the clarification.
And thanks for the question. Director Brown.
Thanks, and thanks, Director Arbor, for your comments. So I did want to just appreciate how this has come back and the new timeline on it. Even though we have not managed to have the conversation in Cumberland, I think the 10-year borrowing timeline and the fees associated with it will help potentially move us toward joining the service, and also while we struggled to support, as Director Arbor said, the plastic field, we do want to contribute to this service that also serves Cumberland. And so that conversation, I look forward to that conversation at our council table, and appreciate the work that staff's done to get the timelines and the cost down to a better, more manageable level.
Thanks for providing that context, Director. And we have Director Grieve next. Go ahead.
Thanks. So the way I read it, if it was 5-year borrowing on an $800,000 house, it would work out to about $144. Is that correct? $28.80 per year for 5 years. Is that, I'm reading this correctly? Because it's not an insurmountable amount of money by any stretch of the imagination. And then with the 10-year, then it drops down to 22.33 for what? How many years there? And then, yeah. So it's sliding scale, correct?
Yeah, the shorter amount of time we borrow the money for, the less is paid. I haven't done
On the back end.
Yeah,
But
that's
not on the
correct.
front end. Front end is the same.
Exactly. But
so it's, you know, it's another question, I guess, is, you know, I guess we can't proceed unless we have unanimous consent. But yeah, I mean, that I think now that we've gone through this process and we actually see where we're at financially, which we did not. In the springtime, we haven't even had our budget finalized, so we didn't know where we were at. So I just wonder if there's any appetite at all on the director or the electoral area directors to maybe change their stance on this, because it seems to me that it's you know, it's not an incredible amount of money, and it has a lot of paybacks, as we all know. The other thing is, if I may, I think it's useless to talk about an AAP. Anytime we've had an AAP, even when our preliminary information shows us we have 70–80% approval out there in the community, that when we call the AAP, all these gremlins crawl out of the woodwork. And we have all these incredible stories about what's going to happen if we approve this thing. And it sends shudders through the populace. And of course, you know, given a choice of yes or no, guess which one people pick? Now, a little better chance maybe if we go to a referendum, because then you're going to take in the whole populace. Well, that's another question. I guess everybody except for the islands and Cumberland at this point, right? So if we're going to go for a referendum, we may as well throw a couple of by-elections in there for good measure and get on with it. Thanks.
does staff want to provide any context to what Director Grieve is referring to? Because how I interpreted some of your commentary is that there is still an opportunity to agree to the amendment to our bylaw. And I don't want to put words in your mouth. I want to make sure that I'm understanding. Sorry, and then I'm not turning on your microphone. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I throw it out there. I throw the gauntlet down. You know, we're in a different place than we were in the spring. I think that we can see quite clearly what it entails, what we're going to end up with at the end of the day, and the benefit for the greater community. So I'd be willing to change my vote, yes. I don't know if the other directors that voted against it would be as well, so.
That is helpful, and maybe staff want to comment on whether or not that's still an option or how that would look should another director join Director Grieve in looking at the 5-year option.
Sure. So I think the staff recommendation, the staff report is what we have come up with, and we feel that is the best approach forward for the commission to consider. As far as I understand, the bylaws that were given third reading that we were seeking consent on, they are still at third reading, and they still have the ability or the opportunity to receive consent. That being said, staff are recommending the approach in front of you in the staff report today, given the uncertainty around the previous approach that we or the outcome, I guess, of the previous approach that we used. Jake, is there anything more to add to that context?
I gotta remember, are you 21?
Thanks. Thanks, James. Just one point. I think Director Grieve may have mentioned around the approval threshold for that consent as being unanimous. It is 2/3 of the participants. So 4 of the 5, is my understanding of the participants would require that. And so just to make that clear. But yes, bylaw 795, I think, is the bylaw that was given 3 readings. It's still active. And if those directors, if the commission chose and the board supported continuing to proceed with seeking the consent of councils and electoral area directors, that could proceed provided we have that support in place.
I would also just add to that, the staff are recommending in the report here the long-term borrowing approach that's presented, given where we've come to and the information presented to the board today or to the commission today.
Thanks for that. Director Morin.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think what kind of seals the deal for me is the growth of our community, which was outlined in our delegation as well as in staff reports over the last while in almost every service area that we discuss. I know Courtney alone, the population growth was well beyond the provincial average, and that's not slowing down. And Cumberland, I believe, was even more so than Courtney. So I think we absolutely know that our community is growing very quickly beyond the provincial average. And with that comes families and youth and even grandparents who may play soccer, as Director Hillian pointed out. Actually, as an aside, he's already kind of stated his bias, but I actually thought it would be great if he actually wore his medal today, which he declined to do. But anyway, it is quite nice. So I think, in all seriousness, I think that the growth of our community can't be underestimated. And I know that it is tough to get, a family member into soccer. I've experienced that before. But the other thing I'd like to stress is that this field is not just for soccer. It, as outlined, it is to accommodate other uses, and it's right beside the high school, and that we have a great partnership. And I guess the final point is that, like every other infrastructure project, every minute or day we wait, the costs escalate. So it's inevitable that we're going to need this. So do we do it now, or do we wait 5 more years and the costs escalate, and then we're in a more, a trickier situation with just really being behind the 8 ball in terms of being able to service all the folks in our community. Thank you.
Thanks, Director Morin. And Director Kerr.
Yeah, so I appreciate Director Grieve's comments and kind of changing his mind on this one. I think that's a really good example of reviewing the facts ahead of us or in front of us now, and exploring them to at this current juncture. Again, I'm going to push for the 5-year. If I look at this, 91,000 in interest paid by taxpayers if we do a 5-year versus 127,000 paid in interest. So the cost of the field is the same, but we're paying more interest. I recognize the 10-year option allows for a more smooth increase over time. However, we're already behind the 8 ball. We've lost a year on this project. And so this would kick it in the high gear and have less of a jump up for future rec projects in the future. Again, I would, so I think if I understand correctly, and staff, please correct me if I'm wrong, Courtney and Comox have both agreed to the bylaw, and looks like Area C director has. So we would need one of the other 2 area directors to agree to the bylaw to then go the 5-year route. And please, staff, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes, staff are in agreement with that. Director Grieve.
And don't forget to factor in the price of the referendum. Now, I will say that some of the biggest projects that we've taken on did require a referendum. The Comox Valley Airport, the Aquatic Center. But it's a nail biter because I think the Aquatic Center just eked in. If I'm not mistaken, Comox was against it. So with great fear and foreboding here, folks, you run the risk of losing the whole show. And then we're back to square one, and you talk about price escalations. We've seen enough of that in our time in the last few years. So I'm just saying that there's a very good chance that people given a yes, no, always pick no.
Yeah, I hope that's not the case. But yeah, it's not a clear path ahead if we go that route, and there is the additional cost. Director Kerr did speak to the additional cost of interest on the 10-year versus the 5, but should we decide to go with a referendum, there's also the additional $60,000. So then we're looking at what could be an additional $100,000 for what would provide us with the same outcome, which would be a new artificial turf field should it be successful. Director Brown.
Director Grant hasn't spoken yet, I don't think.
Oh.
Okay, thanks you. I just want to mention the affordability piece. So yes, if we shorten it, we are paying less interest over time. But we are currently in an economic environment where our families are struggling to put food on their table, never mind an additional fee of $30 for a single service. So it's always important for us to keep in mind that this is just one service, and we have a lot of services. And then we have our municipal tax rates on top of that, which are all escalating, as we all know, by an extraordinary amount, because we have people who really want to move here because we have great programs like this soccer program. So, and all the other things that are of benefit in this community. So, but if we, anyway, I think the affordability piece is critical if we want people on side with this. And I will just put a plug in for the AAP. It is affordable, it's quick, and we just had one pass in Cumberland with very little trouble. And I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
And Director Grant.
I'm just wondering if Lucy could just tell me what impact would going to the 5-year have on the future projects that we're doing? Because, when you look at AAPs, I've never seen one fail. I know people grumble, but they never fail. And so, it sounds to me like everybody wants to go ahead with this. And I'm not sure why we would do it any other way, actually. But I'm really wondering what impact this would have on the future projects that we have stacking up behind this one if we did the 5-year.
Just one moment. Thanks, Lucy. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Through the chair to the director, I'll start, and maybe Kelly, our manager of financial planning, may want to chime in as well. The implications to your scope of your 10-year capital plan and the rest of your projects that are there in your recreations strategy, and moving through those. If you take this project and we move it to the 5-year borrowing, what it's going to mean, and I think this was mentioned at the table as well, is that over the course of 5 years, there's a greater implication to your households, right? So instead of, I can't remember, I didn't bring my next report over with me. I think it was a $10 implication, which is, I guess, is here in this report as well. You are looking at the $34 a year implication that's going to be added associated with this project. Okay, so that incremental value of $20 more a year for a 5-year period. But the benefit that gives you is that once you get past that 5 years, then you have more room filled out. So more room there from the perspective of, okay, maybe it's all right now to bring on your next project. And then there's some relief to the household from a tax perspective. And you also have opportunity now to moving forward with your next project. And with the same level of taxation, for example, you're able to do that as well without having to create this spike in their overall household budgets as well. So there's advantages and disadvantages in it all. I think that's the beauty of doing your long-term planning as well. What it is you would like to consider, and would look forward to your input and feedback on how does affordability feel from the perspective of grouping a number of projects together and how they're laid out as well.
Yeah, there's many decision points in this process as we look to our capital plan. Did you have a follow-up, Director Grant?
Well, I'm actually just trying to find the next page. Sorry. On it, and I can't find it in my report. I know I read it, but I can't find it, so. There it is, okay.
Page 7.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, we have Director Grieve. We should perhaps try to move toward a motion as we're running out of time, and we do have some more agenda items. I think we've had a pretty good discussion on this. Director Grieve, I'll turn it over to you for the last question or comment.
Okay, I'm going to be very brief, but anybody who's been around a while will remember the Harold Macy Soul and Spirit Park, where he said it's going to cost a pizza and a case of beer. Well, in this case, $28.80 barely buys you a case of beer. So it's like you're donating 1 case of beer a year to make this happen. Thank you.
Thanks. And without putting you on the spot, Director Hardy, I think you're the only director who hasn't commented. Is there anything you'd like to add before we move forward to a motion? Okay. All right, so I'm looking to the board for a motion on this. Oh, yeah, right, we're on receipt. My apologies. Anyone opposed to receipt? Seeing none, that's carried. And looking for a motion. Oh, Director Kerr's gonna be
Oh,
you.
just
do
be
it,
Director
yeah.
Grant. I'll move the recommendation.
You can second. We'll move it by Kerr and second by Grant. Okay, any further discussion on the recommendation? Just double checking online. I don't see any other hands or lights on, so I will call the question. All those in favor? And any opposed? Are you in favor, Director Arbor? I know that your commentary was maybe not supportive, so I just want to make sure that we have your vote on record.
Thanks, I'm not opposed.
Okay, wonderful. That passes unanimously. Okay, moving right along here. Next up, we have the draft recreation long-range capital planning report, and I'll pass it back to staff.
Thanks very much, Madam Chair and Commission. So this staff report is fairly comprehensive. You're going to receive a presentation from sorry, just double checking here. You'll be receiving a presentation from Trish Morgan, our Assistant Senior Manager of Recreation Services, and Kelly Broughton, our Manager of Financial Planning. And Lucy may chime in along the way here as well. If we take a step back and we think about the value of your Recreation Commission strategic plan, it really does set that roadmap for investment not just on new infrastructure, but on our existing maintenance, existing maintenance for the existing infrastructure. And recognizing that that investment is so important to the community as a whole. This report, and I think Trish and Kelly will probably touch on this. This is a first time that we've presented such a comprehensive document, this 20-year outlook. And so we are looking for feedback along the way. There's no recommendation you'll see in this report, but we are looking for feedback, and it's a little bit of a temperature check to see what the commission thinks about this this format and this sequencing of projects. And then with that dialogue and discussion, we will incorporate that into our financial planning materials that we'll present to you in January, and look to refine things from there. So without further ado, Trish, I think I'll turn it over to you to start the presentation.
Great, thank you, James. Yeah, so Kelly and I are here to introduce to you the draft long-range capital plan for Service 645 recreation complexes and Service 601 track and fields. The development of this plan has been a collaborative process between the Recreation Department and the Finance Department, along with some help from our climate action team. So why are we here? So over the last few years, the Recreation Department has been diligently working on a variety of assessments and plans, and it's time to bring all of those together into one comprehensive strategy. This is the first time that the CVRD has undertaken a 20-year capital plan for recreation. And it's important to note that this is a long-range plan that is a living document, and it can be updated or changed by the Commissioner Board at any time. It's a guiding document that sets a 20-year vision, but nothing's set in stone, and it can be changed or updated. It will help to guide us in our asset management planning and life cycle replacement. It supports the CBRD in reaching our corporate energy and emissions targets, and it supports the goals of the Recreation Strategic Plan. So as the Sports and Aquatic Center are both reaching major asset renewal milestones, we're reminded of the importance of asset management and life cycle replacement planning. For this reason, previous assessments have provided valuable information that have been incorporated into the development of the capital plan. The decarbonization strategy that was completed in May has also informed the capital plan. The timelines to complete a number of the projects identified in the strategy have been compressed in order to take advantage of opportunities for grants and to reach SEEP targets earlier than originally planned. And finally, the capital plan includes investment into major recreation infrastructure identified in the Recreation Strategic Plan. The plan assumes that new capital is constructed between 2025 and 2033. This includes a second artificial turf field that's constructed in 2025 using the design chosen by the Commission last fall. A third arena is included in the plan with the costing based on the community rink concept, as this represents the minimum requirements from a programming and user group perspective. Following the completion of the business case, the Commission may wish to revisit this cost. The addition of a 25-meter tank to the Aquatic Center is also included based off of the information included in the aquatic strategy. Following the completion of the feasibility study, costing can be updated for that project as well. And finally, the plan assumes that the Sports Center pool will be repurposed in 2035 following the opening of the addition of the new tank at the Aquatic Center. Kelly's going to talk about some of the financial assumptions further in the presentation, but before that, there are a few key assumptions that we have made. Although there is a real possibility of grant funding and we plan to pursue as many grants as possible, we have to build our plan with the assumption that grants will not be a source of funding. They're never guaranteed until we know for sure. Asset management lifecycle needs are aligned with decarbonization, as many of our assets are reaching the end of their useful lives, and instead of replacing them with like-for-like equipment, there's an opportunity to upgrade them with equipment that will reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. And large-scale capital projects can be grouped in terms of timing with decarbonization and lifecycle replacement projects in order to maximize economies of scale in terms of resources and costs, reducing shutdowns, and increasing efficiencies. Using the financial strategy, the capital plan sets a path where asset renewal, decarbonization, and the construction of new infrastructure is possible, particularly over the next 10 years, as envisioned in the Recreation Strategic Plan. This slide represents a 10-year timeline and demonstrates how the various significant capital projects fit into that horizon. Now I'm going to pass it on to Kelly. Thank you, Trish. Not go to the podium.
So long-term financial planning, it's big picture thinking. It ties to the strategic plan and it allows the decisions to be focused on the long-term objectives and identified priorities. It highlights long-term trends and service levels, shows decision point areas for adjustments needed. It identifies future opportunities, and it also identifies potential risks to revenue deficiencies, reserve levels, and debt management practices. Most importantly, long-term financial planning is an essential part of an overall fiscal framework, contributing to fiscal health and sustainable services. It highlights key components for advancing towards sustainability while maintaining affordability. Sustainability, so fiscal responsibility. It's balancing the needs and the desires of the community against the finite resources that we have. It keeps the plan aligned with the commission and the board endorsed plans. Fiscal health includes asset management, including implementation of best practices. It's for building healthy reserve balancing and debt management, ensuring we are not overextending our use of this type of funding. The environmental responsibility, we've factored in decarbonization projects where the planning has been possible to receive the greatest financial benefit. For social responsibility, recreational programming should be accessible and affordable to everyone. Recreation staff are starting an accessibility study later this fall to identify shortcomings and plan for upgrades. Long-term financial planning shows where the pitch points are, community needs versus affordability. It highlights trends and brings focus to the overall visions and objectives. It accommodates growth and shows gaps in funding where work is needed. The province of BC defines sustainability as the ability to provide the service provision and other financial requirements without compromising the capacity to meet future commitments. This long-term financial plan helps to ensure that the goals of sustainability and affordability are met, while at the same time allowing for the growth to recreational services required for the community. This one. The draft long-term financial plan. While working through the financial plan, some assumptions have been made. Asset management and life cycling needs are aligned with decarbonization and cost in 2024 dollars. Major projects have had a cost escalation rate used of 5%. All decarbonization, grant funding has not been incorporated, but staff will continue to investigate grant opportunities and apply for all projects that meet the grant criteria. $500,000 from the new CVRD internal cost of carbon reserve have been applied to some of the decarbonization projects. The cost of debt has been aligned with the latest MFA projections as of September 2024. Accessibility upgrades are pending and not included. They will be incorporated into the 2025 to 2029 financial planning process. Most importantly, this is a first draft. Using the assumptions that the major capital projects identified will proceed as described by Trish earlier. There will be many opportunities to revisit and rework the plan according to the direction of the Commission. This plan is presented for information only. The draft funding strategy. Within the recreational services, tax requisitions are the primary source of funding for the operational budgets, which contribute to the reserves as the reserve contributions flow from operationals. In addition to the reserve transfers, grant funds, contributions from other sources, other governments and school districts, etc., and debt are the common sources of funds. For the purpose of this plan, we have applied all sources available at this time. Reserve contributions at the start of the plan are low. As they are now, they cannot cover the life cycling requirements identified from the asset management plan. We need to work on increasing the reserve balances. Underfunding in the past has left recreation in a position of not being able to meet current life cycling needs. The reserve targets need to be established and building adequate annual contributions will get us to a place where borrowing for the most part will not be required for asset life cycling needs. Long-term planning has highlighted to increase the need for future planning. We cannot keep borrowing to fund asset management. During the 2025 to 2029 financial plan, much work needs to be performed around the minimum reserve balances. Although we have a general idea of the increased contributions needed, until the operational expenditures and revenues are updated later this fall, we won't know what the overall impact is to the recreation service. Contributions from School District 71 have been included as funding sources according to the existing agreement for the turf project. Grants. The only grant funding included in the plan so far is the Growing Community Funds allocation of $808,500 allocated to the turf fund. Staff continue to investigate and pursue any and all opportunities as they come up. If we are a successful applicant, the grant award will be a welcome source of funds for these services. Debt. The use of debt is necessary to complete this plan. Careful considerations of amounts and timelines have been given. The terms of all debt planned aligns within the life cycle of the assets. However, due to the reserve balance limitations, some of the asset renewal expenditures will need to be considered twice. Once for the debt servicing on the existing renewal, which are included in this plan, and while concurrently saving and planning for the next renewal cycle. However, the need to use debt in the last 10 years has been eliminated if a comprehensive reserve policy is implemented. Debt servicing. Is it affordable? That's your decision. The assumption is that the layering of the debt servicing in the plan has been calculated using the 2025 start for the second term. When developing the debt strategy, the timing of each project became very important. It increases the amount of, increases to the borrowing is planned gradually, and the projects have start dates that don't overlap, so the debt servicing expenses don't hit the taxpayer all at once. The debt ranges from a low of $1942 to a high of just over $192 during the debt cycle. I'll now turn this back over to Trish.
So I'm just briefly going to talk about some of the benefits of grouping some of the capital projects together. As Kelly mentioned, we've been careful to not overlap any of the major capital projects, but there are some benefits to grouping decarbonization and life cycle replacement projects with the construction of new facilities at the same time. So if the commission decides to move forward with the construction of arena starting in 2027, and in addition to the aquatic center starting in 2031, staff recommend exploring the opportunity to also complete major life cycle replacement and decarbonization projects and other renovations at the same time. The timing of some may change slightly from what is proposed if we're unsuccessful in receiving grants, like the Green and Inclusive Community Grant that we're proposing to apply for. We may have to move some things out by a year, but there's a number of advantages to this approach. So we may realize economies of scale by completing multiple projects at once with a single general contractor to oversee the full scope of the project. So in the instance of a new arena, it would be construction of a new arena, renovations to the sports center and the sports center pool that would be useful for even when the sports center pool is closed in the future, and replacement of equipment and doing some of the decarbonization projects. Front-loading decarbonization projects will also ensure that SEEP targets are met on schedule and mitigate risk due to procurement or construction delays. Cost savings will be realized through reduced escalation costs if major projects, major construction is completed in the shorter term versus the longer term. And by grouping larger capital projects together, it'll reduce the number of facility closures needed over the next 10 years. This will provide greater predictability for staff, user groups, and the public, allowing for more effective long-term planning. And this predictability is very essential for bidding on large events, organizing camps, and other activities that require multi-year preparation. So on to next steps. And I think Lucy's going to talk about the first part of this.
Thank you. Yes, so as we arrive to near the end of our presentation, just wanted to circle in on next steps, and I'll just go through the ones that are related to our budget process, and Trish will discuss those next steps related to the projects. So we're quite pleased to be able to bring this to the commission, this body of financial planning work. And as was mentioned at the onset of the presentation, this marks the first time for recreation services where this type of long-range planning has been drawn together. I wanted to mention that it is as well the first go round for financial services, and we recognize it's only the beginning of establishing this practice for CVRD services. We are planning to continue with further analysis and improvements, and as Kelly has mentioned, our focus as we continue to work on this year's budget cycle is to really circle in on those reserves and what's needed in that area. We appreciate the commission's feedback on the plan, on this plan, and support in whatever way that you need us to from a decision-making process. Next, in the budget process, all the input and direction that staff receive today will work it into the 2025 proposed capital and operating budget. That budget package is planned to be delivered to the CVRD board similar to last year near the end of January. And then in early February, the commission will meet to deliberate the budget, make any adjustments as you wish, and then give your endorsement. It'll then flow to the CVRD board for adoption and for the budget bylaw as well. Where capital projects include components of long-term debt, as many are within this recreation plan, further authorization through borrowing bylaws and alternative approval process will be required prior to proceeding with the new pieces of infrastructure. The method for gaining this debt authorization can be discussed as part of the proposed budget discussions. Now let's pass it back over to Trish.
Thanks, Lucy. So in terms of next steps for the projects, as I noted at the beginning, the capital plan is a living document, and we expect there will be regular updates and review of the capital plan. There's still a lot of work to be done that will provide information for the commission to consider, which may inform future versions of the plan. This work includes the completion of a business case for Arena 3, completion of an accessibility audit, submission of grant applications, a feasibility study for an addition of a 25-meter tank on the aquatic center, and a decision on the future of the sports center pool, which may be informed by a dry floor assessment. So in closing, we're looking for your feedback. This is the first time that we've put something like this together, and we've tried to incorporate all of the different plans that we've been tasked with, all of the different projects that the commission has identified over the last year and through the Recreation Strategic Plan. And now we're looking for feedback from you in terms of timing of projects, benefits and implications of the plan for the community, and whether or not this type of planning is helpful for the commission and that sort of thing. So thank you.
Thank you so much for the report and the presentation. This is a major piece of work, and I really appreciate the efforts in putting this together the way it's presented. And with that, I'll pass it over to alternate director Jolicoeur. I think you had, oh no, sorry, it's Director Arbor had his hand up first.
Yeah, thanks. That is a good piece of work and consolidated. It's been really helpful the last few months to see the comprehensive plan costed out. I still think that, I mean, it was presented in June. We had the conversation there. I think we're still leaving some chips on the table in terms of the potential for additional decarbonization, albeit with the costs we don't have, for example, would be if we did the heat exchange between the arena and the school, or the hospital and the swimming pool. So the plan is not fully comprehensive, but in terms of a lot of the pieces, the 4 to 6 million for decarbonization, those are very tangible, and also the costs for the arena and the pool. So yeah, so I really want to thank staff for that work to just bring it all together and for our consideration. I've spoken before that I wish we were making decisions, some of the decisions, for example, like this is $100 million commitment. potentially, like we're not voting on it today, but I wish we were at the same stage with our housing initiative, and which equivalently, it'd be interesting to see what $100 million does there. But I won't belabor the point. I think this is a good piece of work and will really aid some sound decision. Thanks.
Thanks for those comments. And Director Jolicoeur, you're next.
Thanks, Chair. And yeah, thanks for the thorough staff report. It's nice to see everything laid out. I appreciate being able to have the line of sight over the next 10 plus years around both the life cycle improvements that will be required for our facilities, but also for some of our strategic projects. So really appreciate that. And I can only imagine how much back and forth between different divisions went into this staff report. So really appreciate that. And I really see this as wise practices for the commission to be engaged with when we're thinking about long-term planning. Yeah, I think, zooming out a little bit, when we engaged in our commission strategic planning process about a year and a bit ago, one of the options on the table was a consolidated new site for the recreational facilities that were that through the various reports and analysis were identified as being needed for our growing communities. And now seeing everything kind of priced out in 2024 numbers, I seem to recall at that time that it was around 100 million for a consolidated site without the land purchase, of course. And so given that we are quite close to that number with existing facility, existing sites and expansions, I'm wondering if it would be good for us to refresh what that number would look like, given that they are closer than I thought that they would be. Like I thought there was going to be some significant cost savings by having us use existing sites and building on existing facilities. And so I'm wondering if staff could speak to that that option that was presented to us about a year and a bit ago.
Doug DeMarzo, General Manager of Community Services, is going to be able to respond to that query. Doug.
Yeah, I think, thank you through the chair. I think what we saw at the time we were looking at the rec strategic planning numbers was some of the study work and background work was based on as far back as 2021. Some of those numbers were pulled from. So in this time period, we've seen quite an increase in some of those costs. And we've done a lot of work here over the last year to really cement those numbers in 2024 dollars, and then our finance team to escalate. So you're really looking at the idea of what the purchase of land would be on top of this cost plus potential more in operating costs down the road. So, the original field was always believed to have been on school district land. And then the other ideas were to look at a new site of, depending on what the commission, we didn't get to that conversation, but the amount of acreage that would have been required would have been significant. So now that cost is in land costs. So you have to figure out your land costs to what acreage we would have needed, which we estimated at that time. I can't recall exactly, would have been in that $15 million or less range, but there's also public land available. So those questions weren't totally sussed out at that time. I hope that helps answer that. You'd still have this $100 million plus whatever land cost or assembly cost you'd need now moving forward with the rise in construction costs.
Yeah, I guess, Chair, just as a follow-up, and then I do have another question, but I imagine there's others in the room, but just as a follow-up to our staff's comments, I think, if we are, obviously we're not making a decision today, but if we are considering such a large amount of borrowing, I think for myself, at least, it would be helpful to know that we haven't left any stones unturned, given that there are benefits, of course, what we heard in that period of time. There are benefits in consolidating sites that we wouldn't get by expanding our current site. So that would be something I would be curious to know as we embark in considering such a large amount of borrowing. Thanks.
Sorry, so that wasn't a follow-up then? That was an additional comment, or did you want staff to answer?
Yeah, just a comment. Just a comment. Yeah.
Sorry.
Thanks.
Okay, over to Director Brown.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this report. I love this kind of strategic thinking. I think it's really important for us to look long-term and how everything interacts with everything else. So much appreciated for all that work. It was a lot to try and, you know, integrate. So still working on that. And I guess having missed the conversation around moving everything to a different site or moving some things to a different site and the potential synergies, particularly heat exchange or other cost saving and GHG saving opportunities, maybe we do need to keep that on the table in some way. Should an opportunity arrive where somebody gives us a big piece of land or we find a big piece of land or something. So that also, I think the reserve piece and how we manage reserves and increase reserve contributions will greatly impact the tax requisition and potentially help us do this in a much gentler way to our community. And the only other thing that I was disappointed with when I read was the not doing solar. And I get that it is a large initial investment, but that initial investment starts to pay off rather quickly and could potentially end up being revenue. So I would like to see us, or maybe somebody could speak to if there's anything beyond it was a large investment and we don't, or whatever the other reasoning was around it, so that we can continue to keep that on the table.
Yeah, thanks. Pardon me. Through the chair to the director, we did look at solar. The two solar systems that were proposed, one was for the aquatic center and one in the sports center. The sports center solar system was 450 kilowatts, which is over 4 times larger what BC Hydro will currently allow on a net metering agreement. So it gets quite complicated. And then in addition, there was also the likelihood of doing roof improvements to the structural capacity of the roofs. And so I think the idea was to investigate all of those options a little bit more closely, just given the estimated costs from the consultants and the potential complications with a larger system at the sports center. So the aquatic center solar system is still included in the 20-year plan. We could definitely look at moving it up depending on what the cost benefit turns out to be after doing like a more thorough assessment, solar site assessment there.
Sorry, I should have introduced Michael Barnard as our corporate climate response coordinator. For those of you who haven't met Mike, thanks.
Thanks for the answer. Director Brown, you look like you maybe had a follow-up there. If it's a new question, I'll put you in the queue. Okay. You're mic 4, right? 10. Go ahead.
Thanks, Mike. Yes, and potentially we could be lobbying BC Hydro. Where'd he go? For for just a little more flexibility with their programs in the interim.
Yeah, for sure. We have been in discussions with BC Hydro throughout. We work pretty closely with our key account manager, and so I think they are interested in looking more closely at solar. The other thing that we're looking at potentially is a larger solar system at the water treatment plant where we have even more space to do so. So if we were going to do a larger solar system above 100 kilowatts, it's likely that may be a better location to do so. But we're still working with our folks in the engineering department on that.
Thanks for that additional context, Director Grant.
Yeah, thank you. Lucy, I was just wondering, I can't remember, you probably answered this before, but if we borrow money from MFA, can we make extra payments with no penalty, or how does that go?
Through the chair, I'll just pass this over to Kelly to answer
Okay.
for you. Okay.
Thank you. with MFA, if you go into long-term borrowing, you are locked in for the term. You do have opportunities when the rates renew, usually at 10 years, 15 years, where you can pay down a portion of it, but that's the only time you can.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for that. I had a question myself on some of what's laid out in the 20-year capital summary, which is Appendix A in the report. There is the second artificial turf field project laid out in 2025, then a capital renewal. I'm not sure if that's for the track or the other turf, but another capital renewal. And then there's one in 2023 for another $1 million. So, oh yeah, the one in 2023 is the track. The one in 2029 is the first artificial field. And then there's another one in 2044. Is that another renewal for the field one? And if so, are we missing a renewal for field two? Or it seems as though there should be one more renewal cost in that list.
Through the, yes, in response to the chair, you are correct. Yeah, we are missing one there. So,
I mean, it's a long ways off.
Yes.
It's a turf that we don't have yet, but I just wanted to be clear what was in the list.
we thought we got all the numbers.
It's a draft. And I'll pass back to alternate director Jolly Kerr. He had another question.
Thanks, Chair. And I'd be remiss to say on my drive into work this morning, I heard about the success of the AAP process in Kamloops for a consolidated facility of recreation, art, and culture. So I was happy to see that the staff thinking on this is consolidation, and I really appreciate staff mentioning the benefits of consolidating multiple capital projects at once. I guess my curiosity around that is as it relates to the turf AAP process, and I think that we're looking at doing both in the same year. I guess I'm curious because there wasn't a ton of risk identified in the last presentation we had on the turf. It talked about some of the costs related to AAP, but communicating to our residents and taxpayers on these processes, I'm wondering if you can speak to your thinking around how these two would be aligned, spread across the 2025, and what our process will be around engaging the community on this.
So we're looking at potentially an AAP for the turf field in January, between the time that the borrowing bylaw is brought forward to the board. We'd be working on a communications plan and engaging the community so they're clear about what the project involves and how, if they are not in favor, how they can make their voice heard. If the commission wants to move forward with a plan like this, then we'd be looking at another AAP in 2025. We're still kind of looking at the timing, sometimes spring, summer, very early fall. And again, we would have to create a comprehensive communication strategy around that. And because that is quite a big one, if we do go to AAP, we may be looking at a number of different strategies to communicate that out.
Thanks for that.
Just sort of, if I can also add, there's a couple decisions that would need to be made as well. You're still thinking about the type of arena you want to build, so that could change those numbers. So, 2025 is kind of best case scenario for that bigger AAP. And it could be further out depending on the decision timing and process with the rec commission.
Yeah, I thought the timeline was most likely a best case scenario. So yeah, it could be a little bit more spread out than what we had in the report. I don't see any other lights on, and I did have another question. I don't know if you can flick back a few slides to, you had a table in this presentation that I thought was really useful. Couple more back, the one that shows renewal, decarbonization, new facility. Yeah, oh, word. Went two more the other way. There we go. One more there. the decarbonization number is relatively low compared to you know, the total cost and what we're looking ahead to. And my question around that number, because it did say in the plan that we did include the internal cost of carbon in our projections. I couldn't see how that was pulled into the calculation. And so my question is, decarbonization projects, is this net of the internal cost of carbon revenue that we would pull into the service? Or is this before we would be able to fund some of that internally?
This is the cost of them. It includes both the cost to replace like for like and the incremental cost. So it doesn't take into account the internal cost of carbon coming off of that. So, because yeah, so that's what we're anticipating we would pay for that.
Okay, yeah, that's good to hear. And then another question I had was just on the borrowing. It looks like there is, I think 8 or 9 years in a row where we're looking at accumulating debt. Would we go to an approval process, whatever that looks like, for the whole amount? I'm just, because we can't really do an AAP process a number of years in a row. So I'm just, I appreciate not trying to take on all the debt at once, but I'm curious to understand like how we would incorporate new debt as we move through this plan.
So with the AAP, the comprehensive one, at the start of the plan, you would look at doing an overarching loan authorization bylaw. But as each project is started and completed, they would have their own debt issues. So you would bring back their own loan authorization bylaws to go within it, security issuing bylaws to go within the loan. So each, although it's an overarching strategy, each project would have its own debt servicing and long-term debenture to go with it. So we wouldn't be borrowing anything upfront. We would only be borrowing as and when we needed it.
So how, like in the course of the plan, how many times do we expect to move through that borrowing and approval process?
For right now, we have 3 projects identified for it. So we wouldn't need to go out to AAP for each project, but we would be doing the borrowing process 3 times.
Okay.
The AAP is the original authorization to borrow, unless we needed to increase the budget, which hopefully we wouldn't need to at that point.
Okay, yeah, that sounds fairly straightforward. And Director Hillian.
Thanks, Chair. I just want to put in an additional plug for staff looking into the solar option. While at the recent Union of BC Municipalities conference, I attended a session where I believe it was a representation from Williams Lake was talking about the solar installations in their rec center, which had been quite successful. They're actually saving them power, and they seem to have found a way of doing it. I don't know if there's if staff are looking at what's going on in other communities, but I'm sure you are. I totally respect the diligence that you apply to these processes, but if there's something that we can do along those lines, there do seem to be examples of other communities that have made a success of this. Thanks.
Thanks for that comment. And did you want to respond, or didn't want to cut you off?
Through the chair to Director Hillian. So we are completing a roof assessment too. So as Mike mentioned, we need to figure out if there's also structural needs. So between the solar panels and what was estimated, although it was a very high level estimate, we were around $5 million for the structural upgrades and the solar panels. We'll have a better idea once that roof assessment is done, and then we'll have some time where we can dig into, you know, questions with BC Hydro, look at what other organizations have done and that sort of thing. So we may see this brought back and woven into the plan again in the future.
Thanks. I see a sign that there's 2 participants. Oh, okay. It looks like alternate director Jolicoeur was first. Go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. If we go back to the last slide, next steps. And I don't recall if we had discussed this, and I guess I'm just a little hesitant. We had the number 4 there on next steps. We had quite a comprehensive aquatics assessment done report. I'm not sure that we have we discussed doing a feasibility study. Was that in our budget to date? I guess I'm curious to know if that's something that we're using to make the final decision for the extra tank, or if we're basing that decision on our strategic priorities, where we said we would do an extra pool. I guess I'm just hesitant to, put in an extra consulting fee to tell us something that we've already been told through quite an extensive report on the service.
Through the chair to the director. So the aquatic strategy did come up with some options, but what the feasibility study would do is it would hone in on that 25-meter tank, because that wasn't one of the options. It was a smaller tank for lessons and I think a bigger family hot tub. So it would look at just that 25-meter tank, how we could connect that to the facility, what other spaces might be needed, how it exactly fits, and then get a proper Class D estimate on that. So rather than looking at a variety of options, it would just be looking at how do we fit this onto the aquatic center.
Okay, and just as a follow-up, do we have the feasibility study in our current budget planned?
I'd have to look to see. We're hoping to start that in January, but I don't have that with me. I think Kelly's looking it up right now.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks. And Director Arbour.
Yeah, thanks. It's good to see numerous directors asking more questions about the decarb plan. And I would have one further if we're going to look at solar. So, I mean, the 4 to 6 to me is the basic decarb around, some trying to keep our buildings at a good standard and our equipment as well. But I think both at the rec and at the board, we just keep talking, it seems, a bit in circle around some of those bigger projects. So for example, on the waste management board, we've been talking about dealing with the flaring of the methane, which, is a huge issue, but we don't seem to be making a lot of progress on this because we're reliant on an outside partner. And at some point, the reason why I bring that into the rec commission is I think the commonality between the dilemma, the waste management, and the one here is that if we want to have a very meaningful project, we may need to create our own utility. And we've talked about this as rec for the last 6 years I've been on the board, and the opportunity around Vanier to use some of the, because obviously for the arenas, especially if we had a third sheet of ice, where we're drawing heat and trying to get rid of it, and it could go to heat the Vanier, but we never seem to do the feasibility. So if we're going to look at solar and stuff like that, does staff require a motion from the commission to do that additional work, both on like the added opportunities in decarbonization beyond the 4 to 6 million that's been identified? And as someone mentioned earlier, I forget who, but that was a good point. What's the long-term potential savings? I think it was Dr. Brown, but it'd be interesting. So would you need additional direction from the commission in order to undertake those pieces?
I feel through the chair, as we move into the Arena 3 study a little further, it's something we'll ask them to dive down into, those conversations with the school district. They did start originally. Maybe you want to speak to it a little further here, but it was conversations had in our feasibility studies around the arena, and there's current conversations still underway with North Island Hospital with regards to the aquatic center. So that conversation is alive. It's just taking its time to roll through the process and thinking with the North Island Hospital. So in some ways, it's the undertones of the conversations are still there, and have an opportunity to be brought forward with additional studies that'll just naturally correlate with what we're working on. But I'll pass over to Michael for additional information.
Yeah, thanks, Doug. Trish is better able to speak to conversations that have been had with the school and the hospital, but I will say that as part of the second waste heat capture system at Arena 2, we would be looking into making sure that that could in the future tie into a heat share system with the school, particularly in the event that the pool was decommissioned at the sports center, because then that would free up all of that excess heat. And then in addition, if a third arena moves forward, the same thing, we can look at, okay, what benefit is there to add a third heat share system at that time? How much heat would we then have, and what would be available for the school depending on what we did again with that pool. So until some of those decisions are made, it's a bit difficult to say how much we're going to need on site just for our own heating needs and to get rid of the emissions that that facility is currently producing.
Can I have a quick follow-up?
If it's really quick, because we're running out of time, we still have one more item on the agenda. But go ahead.
Sorry. I just thought that was great, really great insight, what I just heard today. And I think it would be good, even if it's high level numbers, is it 5 million or is it 50 million? You know what I mean? Like because as we're considering all these big decisions, it might be good to see what the potential added costs of those initiatives would be. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, thanks for those questions and comments. And yeah, we'll wrap up the discussion now. I'll take a vote on receipt. Is there anyone opposed? Seeing none, that's carried. Oh. The recommendation is for receipt. And moving on to Green and Inclusive Community Building Fund applications. Could I get a motion for receipt? Moved by Grant, seconded by Brown. Over to staff.
Thanks. And again, over to Trish Morgan for this presentation. Trish.
All right, so last one for today. So I'm just presenting a few slides about an opportunity that has recently come out, and that's the Green and Inclusive Community Buildings Fund. So GICB for short is a program that's focused on improving energy efficiency and greenhouse gas emissions, climate resilience, and accessibility. Only buildings for community use are eligible to receive funding through this program, and it is a federal program. There is no limit on the number of applications, but each building must submit a separate application. If successful in submitting an application, we could be provided with up to 80% of eligible costs based on what we've identified. And the application deadline is October 16th. So we are focusing our efforts on submitting an application for the Aquatic Center and the Sports Center that focuses on decarbonization, also with some accessibility upgrades. So at the Aquatic Center, we're looking at 2 projects that could be considered for a total of 1.5 million in decarbonization costs, and then additional costs for accessibility upgrades. The maximum grant, again, would be up to 80%, so possibly up to 1.2 million. And this is in the medium program stream. If we're successful in that application, we will look at doing construction in 2026. And it's important to note that all projects that receive funding have to be completed by March 31st, 2028. So the 2 projects we'd be looking at is an air source heat pump to heat the pool water and electrify the pool air handling unit and take it off natural gas. In terms of the Sports Center, we're looking at up to 8 projects for a total of 3.4 million plus the accessibility upgrades, and again, up to 80%. Or approximately $2.7 million. And this is in the large program stream. If successful, planned construction would be in 2027. Some of the projects we're looking at is an Arena 2 heat reclaim expansion, Arena 2 lobby hydronic heating, Arena 2 electric hydronic heating plant. We need a building to house all of that equipment. North change rooms in Arena 1 hydronic heating, same for the south change rooms, and then replacing the mechanical components for Arena 1's ice surface. So the surface, the arena boards, that all has to be replaced. It's at its end of life. only the mechanical components would be eligible for this type of a grant. So in terms of accessibility, we've got the Comox Valley Accessibility Committee.
Are we missing a slide advancement?
Oh, yes. Thank you. In terms of accessibility, we have the Comox Valley Accessibility Committee who completed a walkthrough in early September. They're going to be providing us with a memo of some accessibility upgrades that we could include in this grant application. They are planning to do a plan for us next summer, but they are helping us to identify some things that would fit into this that might be immediate projects that could be included into this grant application and that we could see some immediate benefit for. And then the work that they're doing through that walkthrough is going to be incorporated into that larger accessibility plan. So we're still working through the application. We wanted to bring this forward to the Rec Commission now. We will be bringing forward a report to the October 8th board meeting with further details on the projects and costs. And at that time, we do need a formal resolution of support from the board for the grant applications. But we wanted to give you a heads up that we are working at this right now. It is if we're able to get the grants, it's a really significant opportunity to advance our work. And this is a really significant portion of work as part of our long-term capital plan. So are there any questions?
Thanks for the presentation. This looks like a great opportunity for some improvements and some support from higher levels of the government. So just to clarify, if we move the recommendation today, this particular application will not come back to this board. It will return to the larger board at the next board meeting. Okay, thank you. I see no lights on. So maybe I'll dispense with receipt. Is there anyone opposed to receipt? Seeing none, that's carried. Moved by Hillian, seconded by Morin. Any questions or comments on the recommendation? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. Is there anyone opposed? And that's carried. All right. Anyone opposed? Meeting's adjourned or terminated.